Hello, Peaceful Profits Nation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and we are joined today by Mike Connolly, our amazing client who has been on the podcast before. We're excited to welcome him back and talk a little bit about books today, and specifically his book that he recently wrote. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chanel. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, first, let me give a brief bio of Mike. Mike Connolly is a direct response marketing consultant and copywriter currently focused on building a successful real estate investing business and sharing his success with other aspiring investors. He's taking his experience and skills gained as a copywriter, serving scores of small to medium-sized businesses over the past 15 years in dozens of industries, from herbal teas to heavy equipment leasing, and focusing everything he's learned on the wild and often wacky world of real estate investing. All right, this is so fun, and I was just reading over your book, the info about your book. It sounds so good, but before we dive into the book specifically, let's get a little background here. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So right now, my focus is split between two different businesses. So can you tell I'm a Gemini, right? And it really started with the copywriting consulting, and I was thinking in that business. Well, just a little bit of background and context. So what I do is I help primarily what I call information marketers, and this would be coaches, course creators, high ticket service providers, particularly in, it just seems like I'm attracted to, and what attracts me is financial and technology, type topics. So those are the clients that I've been working with, in mostly small to medium sized companies over the past 10 to 15 years, really. And I'm evolving from this place of having basically what was a freelance business to wanting to do more, being able to have more impact, being able to scale it up, having a little more leverage with my own time, a little more control over that. And so I got to thinking about a business model that some of my heroes, I guess, in the marketing world, I noticed that they do. So there's guys like Joe Sugarman, who's a kind of well known in the copywriting world. Ryan Dice of digital marketing fame, gentleman who not everybody knows so much about, but his name is Rick Cesari, who actually he kind of helped Joe Foreman with the whole Foreman grill phenomenon. I don't know if you're familiar, but Joe Foreman was this fighter who then promoted a grill, and it was like this multi-million dollar business, and Joe came out really well with it. Anyway, the model that those marketers have is, as opposed to kind of like what I have been doing, which is freelancing, they partner with different companies, products, services, and brands, and apply their marketing expertise to those enterprises, right? And so that's kind of, I'm trying to explain how the real estate thing fits into the picture here. So I'm migrating more towards that kind of a business model in my business today. There's maybe a brief, snippet of how that works.
Okay. And tell us, because I think this is relevant to your book as well, but tell us how you personally got started and what you've done with real estate.
Oh boy. Well, that really goes back to almost, I don't want to get too woo here, but it's almost ancestral. So my grandfather was a builder. In fact, he was in the construction battalion, what they called the CBs in World War II. He built bridges and roads and canals and stuff like that. And when we would go up to visit him, he would take me and my younger brother out on his construction sites, which was actually kind of terrifying because we were tiny little kids, and he would like plunk us up onto these huge, heavy equipment things. But anyway, rolling that forward, summers in high school, I was framing houses, which is an amazing experience. And then, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after college. And I had a brief career as a professional musician, and I wanted to settle down. And I was looking at what could I do that, especially I was interested in something environmentally friendly, and I looked at, okay, so housing is the thing I know somewhat about, which led to solar installations, which actually led to insulation. So, because I realized that was a way more cost-effective solution for people. Did sales for 20 years in that field, and eventually got to the point where, as I was doing that, I was buying and fixing up rental properties. And I got to a point where I was like, "Oh, I'm making so much money in the rental properties. Why am I, working for somebody else?" And so I went out, did real estate for about 7 years until the great financial crisis. I was in like ground zero. Denver was one of the hardest hit of those markets, and my business crashed and burned at that point. At which point I said, well, I'm going to do something else here because there wasn't much happening for me at that point. And that was when I picked up the copywriting business because I had kind of discovered that. Anyway, so yeah, that really was a big learning experience for me, and just in terms of how to successfully invest in real estate and the mistakes to avoid. But of recent, what I've been doing is picking that back up again. So that's a long-winded answer to that's kind of how I get into the whole real estate thing.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. So you're now doing real estate as, another business or side of your business. Why were you interested in adding a book to that business?
Yeah, great question. Actually, Chanel, so the book really came about as part of the copywriting business. It started out with learning about the OBMM method, through Mike Shreve's his book, One Book Millions method, because a client that I was working with in the mortgage industry, he was a mortgage broker. I just written what we called a consumer awareness guide. It was this 27-page, basically frequently asked questions that would save him. One of his big pain points was he'd get on the phone with somebody and everybody's asking him the same questions over and over and over again, right? So he wanted to have something where he could, he'd say, please read this first, before we have a conversation. But I felt that what he really needed was a book. It would just do so much more for him. And that was when I kind of discovered that whole process. Anyway, long story short, I had another client who I was preaching the gospel of book funnels to. And they said, this sounds really good. This is exactly what they needed. And it really, really was. And we were all set to go. And I actually enrolled in the book sprint program, Mike's program, just this past spring, starting in January. And at the last minute, they went through a big kind of pivot in their business. The CEO basically left the company. And so they said, well, we're not going to do the book project now. And I was like, well, I think I'll do it. So that was kind of how it got started. And quite honestly, that was for the sprint. But quite honestly, I had started writing a book earlier on the whole topic of sales funnels. It was going to be the ultimate sales funnel was the thing. But as I got into writing that, I realized, there's just a few gaps there. Is there a topic that I really have more expertise in and experience? And of course, the real estate thing was like, well, this is something I think I can, address. So at that point, I pivoted. I said, all right, I'm going to do the sprint. I'm going to focus on the real estate as the first book. There's more books coming, I think, but anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of how it came out.
Okay, that's so cool. That's so interesting to hear how that all, came to be and brought you here to write a book. So what was the process like for you of this book writing process in the book sprint?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess process wise, I would say, I mean, I get up and write. So that I've been doing for a while anyway, but especially with a book and committing, to with the sprint, I wanted to get it done by, X date. I said, I really got to just, put in the time. And so 45 minutes, every morning. I mean, that was kind of the main thing. Process wise, I guess you could say, one of the first things was taking what turned out to be a lot more information and expertise that I even realized that I had, and trying to structure that into a framework that makes a really effective marketing asset, right? And so I had started with just basically blurting out all of this information, and I just cranked out the whole thing. And I got a version done by the date that I targeted. But as I went through the coaching and everything, and this was extremely helpful, was um, Meredith was kind of my main coach there, gave me a lot of very, very constructive feedback in terms of how does it feel from the reader's point of view? And as well as a lot of encouragement, by the way, which I really, found helpful too. But anyway, so from going to this very, very rough draft to taking the feedback that I received from Meredith in particular, and then going through the process of just restructuring it all, just kind of,
Yeah.
taking this piece over here and, from chapter 3 and moving it into chapter 6 and stuff like that. And which is kind of the phase that I'm in right now. I'm just now completing the restructuring and having, kind of more of the final edits in place, which is a relief, by the way. But anyway, yeah, so that was my process with it, was just basically blurting it all out and then restructuring it. I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing that way. It's kind of messy. There's a lot of, work that you probably don't need to do. What I really learned, especially I think from the sprint, was there there are questions that you can ask that really help you structure the thing, and then start there, do your research. I would say those are the two things, was structure and research. And then it's just a matter of kind of almost filling in the blanks, almost like a Mad Libs type thing. It's like, okay, so I know this needs to go here. I would say that's probably the more, efficient way to do it. But yeah, so then that's how you learn. And that was my learning curve. Really, I mean, the beauty of it was the learning,
Yeah. So
having product is wonderful, but also I'm like, oh, okay, I see how this works now.
yeah. So what were some of the things that you learned? What were some of your aha moments in the writing experience?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's sort of two sides to this one coin, which is, um, I thought I knew. So there's this thing called the curse of knowledge. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but basically it means that once you sort of become expert in something, it's hard to see how other people don't understand what you already know, right? So I think because I'd been writing copy and had some success in that for a bunch of years, I felt like, oh, well, a book, I can knock that out, no problem. Oh, it didn't work that way. So that was one thing, was I realized how little I actually knew about what it takes to create that particular type of a marketing asset, right? And the other side of that coin was, sitting down to actually communicate this to a reader. One of the biggest challenges was like, dang, there's so much I really want to share with people, but you can't overwhelm a reader, especially in a book. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference if you're having a conversation with somebody, but in a book, you need to really kind of, parse it out in bite-sized chunks
Yeah.
so that it's actionable, so that it's helpful, so there's value there. So that was another big thing for me, was like, okay, Mike, so all this stuff. How do you actually, you know, kind of almost spoon feed it to a reader in a way that's going to be helpful? So I guess those were kind of the two biggest ahas I had as far as going through that whole process.
That's good. I can see, I think that's really powerful to think about, because there are so many things that we already know. And it's just so easy to, come in as the expert and either give too much information or too little information, and finding that sweet spot of the information that's actually needed, that's actually helpful, that's going to get the people the results that they came to the book for. I can see how that process, is a balancing act.
Yeah, and I have to say, just briefly, I have noticed there's just been a few people who've come to me, for help and guidance where they're like, they have this incredible vision and they're just spouting all this information, but they're not getting a following. They're not connecting with people. And I think the challenge is exactly like what you just said is, giving it to people in a way that they can say, aha, okay, I get how to move forward with this.
Yeah. And it does. It takes practice and figuring out what that exactly means for your particular audience.
Yeah.
So moving forward, then, what are your plans for your book and how will you use this in your business?
Yeah, great question. So the plan for the book is to just get it done. I'm almost there. I feel like I'm just on the home stretch at the finish line, 2 yards from goal. And so plan number one is just get it done. And I think at that point, I'm going to step back, take a break, reflect, think, okay, so what have I learned here? What do I want to do with it? There are several possibilities. One is I could simply use it as a demonstration piece for copywriting consulting clients and say, hey, look, here's something I've done. Here's, what it can do for me. And you might consider doing something like this, either as, a referral partner to Peaceful Profits, to do that actual work, or, I might do it myself, for them. So that's one path that I'm considering. Another, obviously, would be, in the real estate space to coach and help people. There's, sort of the route that I have seen and have, engaged with mentors in, which is you create a course, you have group coaching, you have a higher level, let's say mastermind, type thing. And I think that is a possibility. I'm sort of asking myself, is that really the business that I want? And maybe it would just be a consulting practice where, I just have a few clients come in. The book is like what Mike calls it, the front to your store, the front door to your store, right? And because my interest and something that I'm just so fascinated with is the marketing. I kind of think that might be the ticket, would be the book as an entree to consulting, in particular relation to marketing for for real estate investors. So something along those lines. I'm still trying to figure all that out.
Well, I think that's so cool. First of all, I love that you say, I'm going to finish the book and then I'm going to reflect. I think that that's really, I think so many of us, especially as entrepreneurs, we finish the book and then immediately we move on to the next thing, whether it's finishing a book or finishing whatever, boom, into the next thing. And so that reflection piece is an awesome part of your plan because it opens the door to possibility, to what comes next. And I love that you've laid out all these different ways that you could go with it, even a couple that I wouldn't have thought of, right? Like coaching, that's probably traditional, what we see, like you write a book that then leads to your coaching business on the back end that's related to the book. But also this idea that you can use this book to say, hey, I'm a copywriter and I wrote this book. And even though it's not about copywriting, it still shows your skills. And then this other idea of referral partners. We have a great referral program here at Peaceful Profits. And so being able to say, look, here's the physical evidence or digital evidence, whichever way it
Mhm.
goes, right, of what I did. And you could have that in your business, how powerful as an additional income stream for you as a referral partner. So I think that's really cool to recognize all the things that a book can do for you and to take that time to reflect. So I love that answer. I think that's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of directions there it could go. And by the way, I think it's just the first of there's a few more that just need to get written. So
Yeah. Yeah. So this, I mean, and I'm sure the process will get, like you said, it's not the way you would recommend doing it. Well, now, that you had just written everything and then had to restructure later. Well, now having one under your belt, you can go and do it a different way. And it'll
I'm
probably
hoping the
be
next one will
smoother. Yeah.
hoping the next one will be less painful.
There you go. Hopefully so. Okay, well, my next question for you then is where can people find you and learn more about you, your copywriting, and all the things that you're up to?
Yeah, so I think probably the best would be just to go to my copywriting business website. It's strategiccopy.com. And I would highly recommend getting on my newsletter there. I do a weekly newsletter. People seem to really like that. And then, but and if somebody wanted to have more of a direct connection, there's a page there where you can book a 15-minute introductory kind of discovery call, or there's another one where you can do a more engaging strategy session where we'll actually craft some copy for you, kind of rapid fire style. So that is at strategiccopy.com/discovery if people wanted to go there. I'm on LinkedIn. That's always a good place to connect as well. It's Michael J. Connolly there, because there's plenty of Mike Connollys out there. They're all imposters, of course, but
Yes, of course. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that. And to finish off, what advice would you give to others who are in this process, either dreaming about writing a book or ready to start writing a book?
yeah, well, I would definitely say do it. I mean, first of all, and I think it's basically like what I was just talking about earlier of the two biggest things I would suggest are research and structure, right? So think about what kind of a framework you're going to have. That's the structure part. Understand all of the pieces that you need to assemble. So all the pieces you're going to need to gather so that you can then assemble it. Kind of like a chef, right? There's this thing in cooking where I forget what they call it. There's a French name for it. Maybe you know it, but
Mise en place or something? Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and so I mean, that would be the thing I would recommend is understand the ingredients that you're going to need for your book project, kind of like the ingredients in a recipe, and then go out and do the research. Of course, Peaceful Profits teaches the specifics on that, but the more you can do that in advance, like it's exponentially less work when you actually sit down to do the project. So those would be the two things I would suggest. And I guess ultimately I would just say, enjoy the journey, because I mean, you're going to go through, there's going to be dark times, that's just how it is with writing anything, but I think particularly a book, because it's a daunting project. You will go through those times, but what great adventure isn't there, challenge in, right? So enjoy it. I guess that would be my final word.
That's wonderful. Okay, I think that's huge because ultimately, yes, you're going to end up with a book and that's fabulous. But if you can enjoy the process along the way, that's great. And I want to highlight one thing you said earlier, that I think is just a really good thing to point out, which you were so dedicated and structured every morning, 45 minutes writing every morning. To set aside that time and to have that habit of writing is really powerful. And so I think that's another thing that we can learn from you, in addition to all of the things that you've taught us today. So, Mike Connolly, thank you for being here. He's at strategiccopy.com. And if any of you listeners are interested in getting help with the book sprint that we talked about today, reach out. Happy to help with that. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.